action. Oh, is my mic on?
Welcome everyone, this is our Wednesday Wisdom where we go over tips, tricks, and information on band instrument repair. Today we are in the Saxophone Pro Shop and we are going to be doing some soldering and disassembling of saxophones today. We're going to show you two types of disassembling and a fixed saxophone body to bow connection as well as the removable one. Before we get to that today, we do have a winner from last week's hashtag competition. This was for the winner of the discount on any course that we have this summer, whether it be the basics for saxophone, basics for clarinet. We also have an advanced saxophone course, which today's procedure is going to be kind of touching on. We also have an engraving course coming up. And next week, we're going to have our good friend Miles DeCastro, who's going to be teaching the clarinet course with us. And he's going to be doing an example technique from his course. So before we get to that, all of that good stuff, let me give you the winner. The winner of this week's hashtag is Matthew Pilot. So Matthew, send me an email. Congratulations, sir. To Rich, R-I-C-H, at MusicMedic.com, and we will get you your prize. And I think it's going to be a pair of these heat-resistant gloves that Ryan is going to show about. Yeah. This week's hashtag is going to be the body to bell. Put that in the comments below. Make sure you click like and subscribe as well. If you're watching this, if you click the bell, it's going to let you know when we start our stream in case we start it early or late or whenever. And so you'll be notified and you can get in on all of the prizes and all the free info that we have. So take body to bell, put it in the comments below, like, share, subscribe.
Did you tell them to like, share, and subscribe, by the way?
I did.
Because they should do that. You guys should like, share, and subscribe. Click the bell.
So, Ryan, this is a viewer-requested video. Someone asked us to demonstrate how we disassemble these parts. We do a lot of work in the Sax Pro Shop on vintage saxophones, which have soldered-on connections. We do a lot of work on baritone saxophones. I want to show you a little bit of that.
Slideshow.
There's our
calendar courses of Slideshow.
Let me get to the slideshow.
There we go.
Here is an example of a top section of a baritone saxophone that has been completely disassembled.
Every part, all the braces, all the body bands, all the braces, the body bands, all of those things.
Here's it looks like a Busher Aristocrat.
Yep.
That is the bow and bell has been removed. And Ryan, while we're having some of these pictures pass through, I just wanted to ask you,
sure,
in terms of why we're doing this, why do we, or when do, not why, but when do you decide to disassemble an instrument, and then why?
When would be at the very beginning of the overhaul process. Normally we would be doing this for ease of access for dent removal. Especially you can see right there in the top crook of a berry. It's, I'm going to say impossible. I'm going to say maybe practically impossible, but pretty much impossible to do proper dent work in the top crook of a berry without unsoldering it.
It's a bold statement.
Yes, so very bold, very bold. I'm going to go on a limb and say that.
And that's why, because it's so difficult.
It is so difficult, and even in the bow of a the larger instruments, the bow of a tenor sax, a bari sax, a bass sax, trying to do dent work with it completely assembled is very difficult, and it's very hard to get all those hard to reach places because they are hard to reach, and they are in the places that are hard to reach. You guessed it. So,
describe this picture here. Now, this is a bow section?
This is a bow section for a bass, and what I was doing here was quite a bit of things, but adding a new bow guard on the very bottom. And you can see actually this actually had all the tone holes unsoldered as well. Another reason to kind of completely, disassemble, completely unsolder, do all the dent work, clean all the tone holes up, and then at the very end, resolder it back on and then continue with the overhaul process.
Okay, so and this is of course that top crook again.
There it is. There's again with more my shoddy soldering. I cleaned it up. It's okay.
And the cleanup work we'll have to talk about in a separate video because there is some valuable information there.
Absolutely.
So Ryan, let's get into the soldered connection.
Sure. Here we are.
Just very briefly, what are the tools that a technician is going to need for us to disassemble the bow to bell connection?
The biggest thing is some kind of soldering torch.
Okay.
What we're using here is the acetylene torch. It's right under there, and I'm using a somewhat large tip. I believe this is a 0, and this is a Smith torch.
Okay.
But it's a somewhat large tip. It's not the largest, but when I am unsoldering larger areas, I want to make sure I have a lot of even heat dispersal. If I'm using a smaller tip, it's very hard to get that whole area to heat up properly in order to remove it.
What are some other considerations before we get to soldering?
Another thing is making sure that once you've unsoldered it, when you go put it back together, you put it back together correctly. So a lot of times what we'll do, technicians, is we'll make little marks on the body tube and then on the body band, any part you have a connection. And that is mainly to line things up properly again. It happens quite a bit in those top crooks of berries, making little marks, making sure that you have everything realigned. The other thing that I will do to make sure that I have the body and the bow realigned properly is I will actually put the key on. Usually I'll put this low E flat C because one post of this E flat is on the body and then the other post is on the bow. And if those aren't aligned, first off, your key might not move, it might not fit in between, and then your pad cup placement over the tone hole is going to be slightly askew if it's twisted one way or the other. So making sure that you have little marks that when you line everything back up, they go exactly where they need to be.
And, well, that's a great tip, Brian. So we have, what about the low E flat? Did you talk about the low E flat as well?
I did, yeah. Lining
okay.
this guy up. Any keys that span great distances, like if you're working on a berry, a lot of times what I'll do is I'll use the bell keys to line everything up. Because a lot of times you'll have everything connected here and then it spans and goes across. So when I'm resoldering the bell and the bow section to the body on a berry, I will use the bell keys as well to get my alignment just right.
Okay, very good. Well, why don't we get into the soldering and unsoldering of the portion of the video here. I see you have your...
I don't think we mentioned this, but this is another thing that I really, really like using, which these are the heat-resistant gloves. I also use these in the buffing room, and I use these, just sometimes when I want to feel like Mickey Mouse with my giant
or when you're
cartoonish
baking.
hands. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
They're
if I'm
like
eating a
up
lot
gloves.
of, I don't know, ribs. It beats using a napkin. So, but I'm using my heat-resistant gloves because I am going to heat this up, and I want to make sure I don't burn my hands. Other safety equipment is also advised. Safety goggles, a safety hat like Rich is wearing. I'm wearing an apron just because.
Tie your hair back.
Yep, tie your hair
set
back.
anything on fire.
Make sure
Very
you're wearing
good.
shoes.
And
all that.
it's good because, it's good because it's good.
It's good because we want to keep you safe.
Yeah, let's get into the.
So let's get into this.
Change
We're
the
moving.
camera angle here,
Yep,
and
here
I
we
will
go.
put a link to the gloves in the description once I get that going.
So here we are. Before I actually start that torch up, I'm going to show you the two areas that I'm going to be focusing in on. Obviously, this area right here, because this is the soldered connection. Okay, so this area right here is soldered. The other area that I'm going to be concerned about is this guy right here, which is my bell to body brace. Okay, again, this is soldered, and you can see we have two parts, two areas that I could unsolder it from. I could unsolder it here on the bell section, or I can unsolder it in the the body. Okay, what I'm going to do is, because this brace is much, much smaller and it's going to take a little less heat, I'm going to unsolder it from the body here. Okay, you can see there's a fairly large flange here, and if this doesn't have any dents underneath of it, I'm going to leave it as is.
Okay.
If there are dents under here, most likely I would unsolder this portion right here. So something to think about. But those are the two areas, so this bell to body section and then this body band right here. Depending on the instrument, you may have keyguards, soldered on keyguards that go from here to here. You're also going to have to think about removing those as well. So let's get into it.
Okay.
Let's get cooking.
Let's get cooking.
Let's get cooking. So here's my torch. First area I'm going to focus in on is this section right here. And all I'm going to do is just kind of keep my fingers spread. So as soon as I heat this up enough with my finger spreading it, it should just pop. There we go.
Wow, cool.
So there we are. We're unsoldered. I'm going to let that cool a little bit. What I've also done in the past is I like to keep a little spray bottle of water, and I can just very quickly mist that down, brings the temperature down, and now it won't stick to itself.
Very
Okay?
cool.
So I've got this section. Now I'm going to have to focus in on this guy right here. And for that, I'm going to usually just tip it up like so. Let me adjust my
Go ahead. Oh, sorry.
camera. Oh, there we
are.
go. So there we are. I will usually tip it up like this when I'm removing it. That way I can...
Do you clamp the bell down or anything?
Not really.
hold it?
Yeah, I just kind of hold it like this. Sometimes I'll have a third person or a second person
Gotcha.
Depends on who's in the shop at that point in time. If it's a Friday, it's just me by myself.
All right. And a lot of people are working in one-man shops, so
Yeah.
this is good for them to see.
So big thing with heating up this body band is you want a lot of even heat, which as you can see while I'm moving the torch around quite a bit. Come on, come on. There we are. So you can see kind of evenly heating this around. If I'm on this side and I need to heat this, I will actually go through the tone hole and heat from the inside.
Oh, very cool tip.
Yeah, and there we
It's starting
go.
to come. Very nice. Look at that.
Moving
Boom.
magic. So there we are.
And of course, if any sort of guard tabs or anything like that fall off, that's kind of
And they did.
something to consider.
Yep.
Any risks with this method, Ryan?
The biggest thing, and you can kind of see it here, is
Oops,
oh, you're fine.
Hey-oh,
Hey-oh, there we are.
Oh, you're out.
Whoa, oh, there we
Sorry,
are.
cameras are different today. We're
That's
in the
right.
shop.
You can see the biggest risk is how this lacquer starts to darken, and eventually it will burn if you add too much heat to it, which is kind of the downside of working with a soldered instrument, is obviously having to unsolder it and then running the risk of burning and damaging lacquer. So that's the biggest concern.
Okay.
You know, obviously, like you said, having other areas like Keyguard flanges falling off as well. If I were doing this for real, not that I didn't do it for real, I did it for real, but if I was doing it for real, I would make sure all the other parts that could pop off, like a post right here next to this area that I'm soldering, I may jig that down, you know, clamp
Okay.
it down. You know, any area that if I maybe get a little too hot and that heat starts to travel up, these posts just start falling off. So I would really make sure that I'm good and prepped before I actually put the torch to it.
Very good. And while you're getting set up to do the next, I was going to show a couple of from the slideshow. This is an instrument just to kind of reinforce that idea of you may have to do some refinishing. So a lot of this kind of really heavy duty disassembly and dent work and soldering, unsoldering goes with that type of instrument that's going to maybe get replated or refinished. I also want to say what's up to Ian, to Steven, and to RW, who keeps saying the same stupid comment. You know, RW, I know about science too. I don't know. I don't comment on it. You know, like whatever robot keeps saying it. I just want to say I love you, but also you're annoying.
I love you. Now stop it.
So Ryan, you are got your ready to do the removable bell, and what is the equipment that we're going to need for this job?
So a couple things we're going to need. Well, we don't need the buffing gloves, although I can still wear them if I want to feel special. The biggest thing is screwdrivers. Because these are removable, now they are held together with screws on this body band and then this bell to body band or brace as well. They all can be unscrewed, which is why you'll need some screwdrivers. You also may need some kind of heat source because the way these are attached, a lot of times they've been epoxied or glued together. And for that in order to heat up that area right in here, okay, we're going to need some kind of heat source, and for that I like to use the air torch. And I will usually set it fairly high, between 400 and 500 degrees.
Before you get to that, Robert's asking, can you buff out the burn lacquer?
It is possible to buff it out. I've actually found that it's kind of difficult to clean up burnt lacquer. I find that if you've done this so many times, you kind of know when the lacquer is going to burn. I will almost preemptively remove some of that lacquer that is going to get burnt, because it's much, much easier to remove unburnt lacquer than it is to remove burnt lacquer. So a lot of times I'll prep that area really, really well, remove maybe just a little bit. And a lot of times if it's this style, it'll be hidden under that body band. So we won't have to worry so much about that burnt lacquer exposed. Obviously if it's this style, you're probably going to see a little bit of burntness. But that can be cleaned up. You can buff that out, and like you said, this is probably another topic for another video, since I do quite a bit of cleanup. Since you guys did see my soldering job on that one, quite a bit of cleanup is necessary.
So Ryan, we've gone over the equipment, which is basically you're going to need an air torch,
Torch and screwdrivers.
disassembly tools. What are some considerations? Where are we? Do we have to? Have you ever had one that's like it's in a detachable bell, but it's been soldered?
Yes, absolutely. That's very, very common. Well, not very, very, but it is common in some models of instruments, particularly Mark 6s, where this band is removable, but this connection from the body to the bow is actually soldered underneath. It's one of two things. They're either going to be, well, look at how white my hand is. Jeez, sorry. It's one of two things. Sorry for our English friends. I should not be doing that. It's one of two things. It's either going to be, like I said, epoxied or glued. Typically, you'll see some kind of maybe silicone caulking. We like to use a two-part epoxy. I've heard of technicians using beeswax. Anything to make that joint airtight. Or it could be, you okay over there?
Yeah, I'm good. Sorry.
Or it could be soldered, which you'll find in some Mark 6s. There are ways to check for that.
How do you check for it,
Thank you, Rich. I was waiting for your question. I didn't want to jump ahead. I know that was one of your questions. You spent
preloaded questions.
Yeah, preloaded questions. I didn't want to jump the gun.
People are commenting, so I was just reading the comments.
Sure. But there is a way to check. A very easy way is to remove your low E flat, and you can actually look inside of this tone hole. Look, we're looking inside of the tone hole, and if you face it just right, look, there it is. You can actually see that connection. Okay. A lot of times if you look in there and you see what looks like glue or maybe some kind of silicone caulking or maybe epoxy, well, guess what? It's epoxied. On the other hand, if you see solder, it's most likely going to be soldered. Here, I don't really see much. Chances are this is epoxied together. Another thing that you can do is actually remove this body band, and you can see the two screws right here. You'd remove this, just slide it up a little bit, and then you can see that connection, whether or not it's been epoxied or soldered.
Okay, so, Ryan, why don't you go ahead and do a little bit of that? Maybe I'll start with the overhead.
Absolutely. So again, like I said, is removing the parts that need to be removed. Let me get this down a little bit. There we go. So there you can see my tools. So the first thing I'm going to do is I am going to remove this keyguard.
Okay,
right?
yeah.
The main reason why is because the keyguard flange is attached to the body band. Okay, or that.
Oh.
Yeah. So we're just going to remove that first, at least just that one screw. See if I can keep everything else attached.
Oh, let's see. Who else can I give a shout out? I'll give a shout out to Robert and Ian saying he's looking forward to seeing the solder cleanup video. I think, Ian, I will put that on the schedule because we haven't done one of those.
We have not. We have not.
Maybe ever, or that's a good one.
It is. It is a good one. Yeah, I have some tips and tricks that I like to use for doing all that cleanup stuff, and I will be happy to share it with all of you.
And we've got a couple of cool supplies that we use in the pro shop that'll be good to check out. And Ian Sim, what's up, Ian?
Here we are. Look. Here we are. Let me get a nice close-up of this. And you can really see with this one, there it is. There's that epoxy.
So you've removed the...
I've just kind of slid that body band up out of the way, and I can clearly see epoxy spilling out. So that's good. So the main reason why we want to use something here, whether it be solder or epoxy or some kind of silicone caulking, is to make this joint airtight. Okay? Because if we just put it together, a lot of chances are air is going to leak out. Well, that's just like a pad leak.
Right.
Okay. So you want to make sure that this is sealed up.
Now, are you going to remove that E-flat C rod as well?
I will.
It spans over the...
I was getting there.
Just thought I was...
Thank you. I was getting there.
While Ryan's doing that, we do have some courses coming up. We've got some basics courses coming up in July, one with Ryan, and then on clarinet with our great friend Miles DeCastro, who's going to be with us next week showing some clarinet techniques that he's going to be going over in that class, and then the advanced course in September with the engraving course later on in the fall. These techniques are going to be covered in depth with Ryan in late September. So go to the website, MusicMedic.com, to the education section and check those out.
That's right.
And we're back. Okay, so
hi-oh, and we're back.
So you're also undoing the body to bow.
Yep. So I'm doing these guys. This is really nice because again, this is just screwed in. So I'll just remove those.
Jonathan says he's doing. He does a ton of re-epoxying on Yamaha student saxes, which they don't have body bands.
They don't.
Which is interesting.
So there we are, removed my body to bell brace. Now this can also, this is very close to coming apart now. All I have to do is just heat up that epoxied area.
Any safety precautions we need to think about when we're heating up epoxy?
Big thing is the main reason why I like to use an air torch is because I'm not using an open flame on the epoxy. You don't want to burn it and give off any kind of fumes. You don't know what's going to do to you, which is why we're in full hazmat.
Absolutely.
Yep, we got our hazmat. We got our fan going.
Yeah, we have a filter over our head.
So here we are. You can see it start to move a little bit, just heating up that epoxy. And I think at a certain point in time, I can go ahead and just pull it apart like so. And there we are. And you can see all that epoxy. You can see it didn't heat it up so much. I can touch it. It's not like I heated it up with the torch.
Well,
just enough to soften that epoxy or whatever type of adhesive or glue that they're using there.
Did I ask you what temperature you had your air torch set to?
I believe I had this set to 500. Like I said,
Okay.
I think it's usually between 400 and 500. I do want a fairly high temperature to loosen up that epoxy. And you can see, there you go.
So so Ryan, it looks like there's less chances of burning lacquer
Yep.
with this procedure.
Absolutely.
In the Sax Pro Shop, which do you guys prefer to work with, the epoxied or the soldered on? I know we do a lot of vintage stuff here. So.
We do. I myself prefer to have just the epoxy because, again, I'm thinking about the repairman down the road. Okay? If
Okay.
I were to solder this together, which is very acceptable, okay, later on down the road, if something were to happen, maybe this bow gets dented, the repair tech goes and tries to remove it, he realizes he has to now unsolder that, which could damage lacquer. So again, like I said, it's mainly about having an airtight connection. I know there's a lot of myths on whether it plays better soldered or epoxied. We're not going to go into that because
Okay.
it doesn't really matter.
Okay.
The main thing is having that airtight connection, and it is much, much easier to remove that when it's only been epoxied. You're not going to burn lacquer. Okay? And the other thing about it is it's much, much easier with epoxy to make sure that it's airtight. Okay? I can apply my epoxy here, I can assemble it, and then what I'll usually do is from the inside, I'll take a little bit on my finger and actually go and coat the inside as well,
Oh.
just like that. That way
tip.
we know it's going to be an airtight connection. It's tough to get that when you're soldering. So.
Okay, very good. Well, Ryan, thank you for that amazing demonstration.
You're welcome.
Make sure all of you take the hashtag for this week, which is the body to bell. Put that in the comments below, and we'll make sure you enter into next week's prize. Matthew Pilot, make sure you send me an email, rich, R-I-C-H, at MusicMedic.com, and I will get you your prize for this week, which was a discount on all the courses. Check out our website for those gloves. I think they are in the safety section. They're like $4 a pair. It's
They are.
a great
They're
deal.
ridiculously cheap.
Yep, and they're great for eating ribs, as
Good-
Ryan
yeah,
says.
or challenging people to duels.
Garrett
Discoveries.
asks what temperature, and that was 500 degrees. That's
500,
in
yeah.
centigrade?
Sure.
Celsi-
Kelvin?
Celsius?
Kelvin? I don't know.
But thank you guys so much for watching. Tune in next week. We're going to be going over the clarinet stuff with our great friend Miles DeCastro. And if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the comments below, as well as any other topic that you want to see us go over. I am going to do the solder cleanup with Ryan in the coming months, so we're looking forward to that too. So until next time, happy repairing.